So switch back to the firm. So let's talk about sort of your role in the firm. We talked a little bit about marketing. You could be running cases, you're managing the firm, maybe you're doing intake. What kind of functions do you have in the firm now, and maybe how do you split up that time?
Yeah, one of the things that is one of our differentiators is that everybody who calls in, whether they're a person we can help or not, so whether they're qualified or not, they get to talk to an attorney on the first call. And, most people in my niche, they don't get to talk to lawyers. They talk to, an intake person or maybe a paralegal. And so that's one of our differentiators. If you call, you're going to talk to a lawyer. And most of the time that's me, because that's something I want to do and I like doing it. And I like being able to help people that we can't help. My goal is that anybody who calls, I'm going to put them in a better spot than they were when they called. So I do spend a fair amount of time talking to potential clients when they call. Most of my day, though, is spent, I would say, putting out the internal fires that are, constantly popping up in firm and trying to teach my people how to not have that fire happen again and how they can manage it themselves. I'm trying to work myself out of a job, but it's a challenge, and I don't know that I'll get there soon, but I'm always working on it. So I would say it's probably of my day, and I'm only in the office maybe 20, 25 hours a week. I would say that, 50% of that time is dealing with my employees and helping them, to make sure that all the wheels are turning still. And probably 25% of the time is dealing with new clients, potential clients, and working on some of the cases that I'm handling in the office, which is not very many anymore, but some of them that I'm handling. And then the other 25% of the time is generating business. How am I going to keep the lights on with new cases?
Welcome to the Founding Partner Podcast. Join your host, Jonathan Hawkins, as we explore the fascinating stories of successful law firm founders. We'll uncover their beginnings, triumph over challenges, and practice growth. Whether you aspire to launch your own firm, have an entrepreneurial spirit, or are just curious about the legal business, you're in the right place. Let's dive in.
Welcome to Founding Partner Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Hawkins. This is a podcast where I get to talk to law firm owners and hear about all the cool shit they're doing. And today, I got a friend of mine, Jason Epstein, who is a personal injury lawyer up in Seattle area. And one of the things I like about Jason is he's not afraid to speak his mind. So this should be a pretty fun conversation. So, Jason, welcome to the show.
Yeah, it frequently gets me into lots of trouble, especially at home. But yes, that is one of my weaknesses. I'm sure that you share it.
Or strengths, depending on the situation.
Sure.
So tell us about your firm. So where are you? What do you guys do? I said personal injury, but is it within that? It could be lots of things. And how many people do you have? All that.
Yeah. So we are in the Pacific Northwest. So Seattle, Bellevue is where our main office is. I've got a Seattle location. I've got 2 satellite offices in some neighboring areas called Federal Way and then one in Renton. We do personal injury, which is really, anytime someone's hurt and there's somebody that we can get on the hook for it, we'll take those cases, but it's primarily car crashes. I am now we've got 4 attorneys total, and I think our total head count is like 12 or 13. That is, on payroll. And then, of course, we've got a ton of other people we work with that are 1099 vendors that do different stuff for us. So it's, I don't know what that makes us. If we're small or mid, I don't know what we are. We're here.
And is it in office, virtual, hybrid?
Yeah, no, we're all in office. I know you and I have had a little LinkedIn fights about this. So when COVID hit, we went to, virtual like everybody did. And our metrics just took a total shit. And so really quickly, the experiment only lasted like 4, 5, 6 weeks. And we were just like, nope, everybody's back in the office full time. I recognize that in 2026, that's an unpopular opinion to make everybody be in the office full time. And I also recognize that I'm potentially missing out on certain talent bases that would prefer either hybrid or remote. But for us, it just didn't work. I found that the way we operate, I needed people in the office that I could yell down the hall and be like, what the fuck are you doing? And, that's just how it works for us.
Well, I'm with you, man. I in office, I think that's the way to go. I really do. And I think it's important, especially for younger lawyers, to be in the office. And people push back and they're like, no, well, you can just train. It's because you don't know how to train virtually. It's not even about the training. Now, that's part of it. It's definitely about the productivity. But, I still get referrals from attorneys that I was in the office with 20 something years ago. And if we had been virtual, they wouldn't be sending me anything because I barely know them.
Yeah. And I love, my door is always open and people will come in and, either to ask questions or just to shoot the shit. And that's kind of the environment that I prefer anyways. So, for us in the office is the way to go.
All right. So let's go back. Did you always know you're going to be a personal injury lawyer? Is that the first thing you did out of law school, or did you do something else?
It was. Yeah, no. So when I was in law school, I went to law school at Pepperdine down in Southern California. And in between, I graduated from USC, University of Southern California, not the USC that you Georgians talk about, the real USC, Southern California. And when I was in between undergrad and law school, I got in a car accident in LA, hired a lawyer, and wound up becoming friends with him. And I was like, this is 100% what I'm going to do. I always knew.
So going into law school, you knew.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And I tell the story. I went to law school knowing I was going to be a personal injury lawyer, and then I never did it. So I'm glad you did, man. I'm glad you did. So when you got out, so you were able to find a job straight out at a personal injury firm?
Not exactly. So when I got out, I had the entrepreneurial spasm that I was going to open my own office when I, literally fresh bar card and I hung out my own shingle. I got really, really lucky that I happened to find an office share situation with a guy who was the incoming president of the Washington State Trial Lawyer Association at that point, now known as WSAJ, Washington State Association for Justice. But so he got me hooked up in the Trial Lawyer Association like right away. And so that was amazing because, I had access to the listserv and had access to people that knew what they were doing. And so I kind of muddled along for 4, 5, 6 months and, picking up a couple cases, but, still not really having any clue what I was doing. And then I asked a couple of questions on the listserv on an issue I was dealing with. And a seasoned attorney reached out to me and was like, hey, it's really cool that you opened up your own office. It's clear that you don't know what you're doing. Do you want to come work for me? And I was like, yes, I do. And so that's where I really learned what I was doing. Was my first job with this other car accident lawyer.
So it's clear you had the entrepreneurial bug from the beginning. Did you do stuff as a kid? Were you involved in sort of selling candy or whatever as a kid?
Yeah. I mean, I had a couple of the, I detailed cars and, I had some stuff that I was always trying to make a buck. My mom was a serial entrepreneur. She owned a bunch of different stores. And then my dad's a surgeon. And so ultimately my mom sold her stores and started running my dad's practice. And so, there was always an entrepreneurial spirit in my house for sure.
So I don't know where this fits in the journey, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it and I don't know the full story, so you're going to have to explain it to me. But I do know that you were involved or have some involvement with like med spa type stuff on the business side, not as representing them or anything like that. Tell me about that and when did that happen and what was that?
Yeah, so I guess it'd be about 20 years ago. My oldest sister, I have 2 older sisters, and the oldest of those sisters was fresh off of a divorce and trying to figure out, how she was going to make ends meet. And so she started kind of doing stuff in that esthetician beauty world. And so back then she was doing this one product that was like a cellulite remover that was called Synergy. I don't know what happened to that company, and so, back then she just was like renting a station in somebody's nail salon or something. And over time, she was growing her business and like reiterating it. For a while, she was doing eyelash extensions and having employees do those. And then she started doing, she would just like, she would find a product that, beauty, aesthetic product that she liked for her. And then she would kind of, bring that into her business. And so over time, she grew her business and it kept evolving. And she grew to the point where she had a couple of estheticians working for her. She had a couple of nurses doing injectables, and then she had a product that is still around, but has lost favor called cool sculpting, that she was doing a crazy amount of cool sculpting business. And so she, her business was growing and growing and growing. And she would always complain to me about the struggles she was having running the business. And I think she was just at the end of her rope. And so I said, look, let me come in and turn your business into a business instead of a job. And so I came in on kind of like, I guess you'd call it a consulting basis, and just kind of cracked the whip and turned it into a business and, created an org chart and said who's in charge of what. And here's everybody's new roles and here's what each person's going to do. And, made sure that people took accountability for their roles and stopped bugging my sister with every, small little question they had about, what should we do here? And in the course of about, I don't know, I'd say 18, 24 months, turned it into a business where she wasn't having to work as much. She was still working a little bit, but not very much. And the business was running. And at about that time, private equity started sniffing. And so since, I had taken her to that point where she then had a sellable asset, because it wasn't just, a cult of personality of her running everything. It was a system, a business with systems. We were able to sell to private equity for a huge multiplier. And she now lives half time in Palm Springs and half time here. And she's completely retired. And I think she sits around all day and counts her money. And I was able to, fortunately I got my beak wet a little bit in the exit, but not enough, but better than nothing. And so I kind of drove that process.
So how did you know how to do that? How did you know how to come in and turn it into a business?
Well, I applied all the same stuff that, you and I talk about in the meetings we go to, in the mastermind meetings. So, when you're on this kind of entrepreneurial journey as a lawyer, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I've got to start running it like a business instead of, like a job. And so for us, and I don't know if you've done this, but for us, we implemented a hybrid version of EOS. And we didn't hire an implementer. We just did it ourselves, read the book and did it ourselves and figured out a way to make it work. And so I took all the same principles and, from EOS that we used for us and just applied it to her business and built out the framework. Similarly, I did all the same marketing stuff that we do for us and just kind of, tweaked it and applied it to the aesthetic industry. And it, worked. It grew her business. A lot of it, to be honest, is that she was doing the right stuff at the right time when private equity happened to be looking for these opportunities. So I don't think that we developed like an amazing unicorn. I just think in some ways we got lucky that it was the right business at the right time with the right amount of revenue that piqued their interest. And actually, interestingly enough, I think we had 3 different groups that were, interested in doing letters of intention at the same time. So that was helpful also.
There is an element of luck for sure. But you mentioned EOS. I want to explore that a little bit. I mean, I know what it is. Probably a lot of listeners know what it is. You can do the self-implementation, which you talked, or you can go hire somebody. I'm curious, what was it like, and how did you guys do it? Who led it? How did you self-implement? And I'm really asking personally because I want to borrow some of your stuff if you're sharing it.
Well, so it's an interesting story. And for everybody else, a little bit about our firm, because when we brought on, me and my partner, Patrick, brought on a third partner, John, and John hired you to go over all our documents and make sure it was a good deal and stuff. So kind of about our structure. But Patrick, my partner for the last 20 something years, it was us 50-50. And Patrick he's an interesting guy in a lot of ways. And one of the things that he says like clockwork is, like we're lawyers and we're smart. And so why would we hire other people when we can figure stuff out on our own? And, it's like, yeah, okay, well, because you hire experts to do expert stuff to save you time, but he doesn't have that same mindset. And so there was I don't know how, but I convinced him at one point to bring in an implementer. Because I said, like, here's what we need to do, read the book. And, he read the book and we were on the same page. And so, and I think part of the reason we brought an implementer was because, and I'm sure you've heard their pitch, is that, hey, it's, whatever, $5,000 for the day. And if you don't like it at the end of the day, I'll give you your money back, right? So he was like, okay, fine. So we brought in the implementer and we did the 1-day session. And at the end of the 1-day session, Patrick was like, I think we can do this on our own. And so, at that point, we had to kind of figure it out on our own because the way our partnership works is when there's a big expense like that, it takes 2 yeses and, 1 no. And so we didn't have 2 yeses to spend the money on a professional implementer. So it's like, okay, let's take what we know and just kind of, make it work for us. And so we did that. And so it's sloppy. And I don't think it's like, we're probably not as efficient with EOS as people who have gone through the formal process and who continue to have an implementer. Like we know people who've been doing it for years and still have their facilitator come in for the quarterlies or whatever. We don't do that. And we also don't really run true level 10 meetings the way that the book sets forth. We've taken the pieces that work for us and do those things and don't do the rest.
Yeah, and I've talked to others. I've read the book probably 3 times and I've taking pieces. I've talked to others, both in law and other professional services, that they say really a true EOS doesn't quite fit a law firm anyway, if you really did it the way the book tells you to do it. So, you got to take the pieces at work. Have you found it helpful?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So we use 90, which I think used to be affiliated with EOS officially, but I think they've split off. And so I think it's 90.io is the website. So that's where we keep our scorecard. And so the leadership team jumps into 90. We update our numbers every week. We have a leadership meeting where we go over our numbers. We'll talk about to-dos and issues. We do set like annual revenue goals and, different goals in the scorecard metrics, but we don't really have come up with quarterly rocks unless there's something we feel like we need to work on, so we're not being, I would say, religiously bound to the format. We're just taking hey, right now we've got this issue, let's IDS it and let's, work through the process and figure it out. And sometimes that'll generate a to-do and sometimes it'll generate a rock. And so when those things happen, we're able to follow up with each other using the 90 system. But yeah, we didn't think we needed kind of strict compliance to the system to make it work for us.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to go back. We'll go back to some of your journey. And so I don't know the story. I want you to tell that when you were a younger lawyer, you were offered partnership.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that.
So I worked for that guy that we talked about for, I think it was 2 or 3 years, and then got an offer and I went to work at another firm, and I was doing pretty well there, bringing in more revenue for them than they ever thought an associate was going to be able to bring in. And so they offered me a partnership. And, I wouldn't say I was super business savvy at that point, but my response, I knew enough to be dangerous and I knew people to ask the right questions to. And so my response to their offer was, okay, open up the book and we'll figure out what the firm is worth. And, I'll buy in at my percentage that you're offering me. And their response to that was, you're fired, go fuck yourself. And they locked the doors and locked me out of my God. And so, I was fortunate that I had seen the writing on the wall that may happen. And so I was able to send out, even though at that point it was no longer neutral, I still sent out a neutral letter that said, hey, I'm no longer there. It's your election, who to go with. While I was sending out that letter, I found out that they were calling everybody and telling everybody that I was on drugs.
Oh man.
And that I was having an affair, and they were just throwing all the darts at me. But a fair number of my cases came with me. And so I was able to kind of transition, land on my feet. And then that turned into what became my current partnership.
For listeners out there, Jason did it the right way. His former employer people did not. Don't do that.
And then the best part is they wound up taking on, I think they were having financial problems. So they took on a big name partner after that, who also was really established, not a young gun like I was. And about 1.5 years later, I was subpoenaed to testify in the trial of that firm dissolution with the new partner. And so, yeah, things got really ugly for them for a while.
You dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
There. Wow.
Absolutely.
Man. So let's talk about, on the theme of partnership. You've also, and you talk as much or as little about this as you want, but you've also had a partner leave while you're a partner. What was that experience like?
Yeah, it was actually the most peaceful transition that one could imagine. So when I first joined up with Premier Law Group, it was 2 partners. It was the 2 founding partners, Daryl and Patrick. Daryl was a little bit older than Patrick. And so after I had been with the firm for, I joined in as a partner and we were all even. And I think it was maybe 5, 6, 7 years later, Daryl just didn't really want to work anymore. And he wanted to really kind of transition down and limit his cases. He was taking to just a couple of things. And so he was like, hey, I want out. And we were like, okay, cool. You take the stuff you're working on. We'll take the stuff we're working on. And we didn't have to change, no money changed hands. There was no fighting. There was nothing about, intellectual property or the website. And we all just went our own ways. And it was super easy and mellow, which, is really lucky. It could have been a disaster and it wasn't.
Yeah, that is another good way to do it. All right, so I want to switch sort of to your firm and sort of how you operate a little bit. And I want to talk about employees because I may have heard you say this before, but recently I heard you talking about it, about you have a 4-day work week for your employees, but there's sort of a catch. So why don't you explain it and sort of how it works?
Yeah. So I'm a firm believer in that, you buy as much clutter as your house can fit. And so I think that's the same way that people work, is that they fill their workday with stuff that they're doing that isn't necessarily their job. And a few years ago, maybe 2, 3 years ago, might have been 4, I saw a study where there were some production type factory businesses that started this model of like, hey, we're going to go to a 4-day work week. We'll pay you for 40 hours, but you only have to work 32 hours. But the production goals don't change. Your weekly production goals are the same. And almost across the board, production didn't dip, even though the amount of time that people were spending dipped by 20%. So I was like, well, there's no reason that wouldn't apply to what we do. And, if you look around, anybody that works in an office, you look around at how much time people are wasting just, bullshitting and talking and stuff. Like, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So we rolled that out to our staff and said, look, everybody's going to get paid for working 5 days, but you only have to work 4, with the catch that our task list, that, the way our case management system works is it generates tasks. Some are automated, some are manually created, but we track our tasks. That's one of the metrics that we track. And so the catch is, if anybody is behind on their tasks at the threshold that we set, then everybody loses their 5th day off, their paid day off for that time period. And so the times when it's been close, where I'll make an announcement in our meeting, like, hey, there's, this person's got a bunch of tasks and I don't know if they're going to be able to get it done with. Everybody pitches in and gets that person's task over the finish line. And so it's been, 3 or 4 years that we've been running this, and it's been no problems at all.
That's hilarious, but great, man. So how was the rollout? Was it you announced it? This is what we're doing. We're starting tomorrow. And what was the reception? Was everybody excited about it? Were they scared?
No, everybody was excited about it. And initially we rolled it out and said it's going to be a pilot program. We're going to try for 90 days and see how it goes. And then there was like immediate buy-in. Like, who doesn't want an extra day off every week? And also, our market in the Northwest is kind of crazy salary wise, because you've got all these, Amazon and Microsoft engineers that are making, $500,000 a year programming. And so, housing prices are insane out here. And so, our market, our salary market is skewed higher. And just because of the size we are and, what we're playing with, we could never really pay at the top end of the market for, our people that work here. So this was another tool that I'd say, like, look, we're going to pay you this, but in reality, you're making more because you're not working those hours, and so it's almost like a 20% raise that everybody got, even though I don't have to pay them anymore, because you just get that day off.
I think it's a great idea. And I guess you're making up for the in-office instead of hybrid or whatever. You get the extra day. Has anyone else done this that you know of? Have you shown anybody and they've sort of taken it from you? Do you know?
Well, we've talked, since I started, I've talked about it in our group, and the group that we're both in, the mastermind group, that's evolved and changed. And so there's probably 30 other firms that have heard that I'm doing this, and some have said they're going to try it. I don't know. I've never gotten reports back from people that have tried it and whether it worked and how they felt about it, but it certainly worked for us.
So I'm curious. So as you're growing, let's say you're more cases are coming in, so people's task lists are getting better, but you haven't hired a new person yet. When do you know, and how does that affect this 4-day work week issue in terms of adding another person and in the tasks? Have you encountered that yet?
Yeah, I mean, yes. So we see that there can be times when, because of the way the workflows hit, that there's a certain subset of tasks that are, might be piling up or might be bigger than they normally are. And so I'll get feedback from people, like, hey, just so you know, you look at my tasks this week, here's what's going on. And we do give a grace period, so like, it's not like completely like you didn't hit it. Everybody's, there's warnings and we know about it ahead of time and stuff. And so when those things have happened, when somebody's like, hey, I'm not going to be able to get it done, and here's why, and it's that way for a couple of weeks in a row, then that's an indicator, like, okay, this person's reaching capacity. And so listening to the employees and getting the feedback is important. We're still small enough that comes to me. So I hear that, and then it's like, okay, let's get somebody else on board.
So this may be a little related. Topic is toxic employees. I heard you talk about this recently too. And, obviously the story you told a minute ago where somebody was having trouble and everybody pitched in to get it done. You have a toxic employee in that mix. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but what kind of experience have you had with toxic employees, and what's your advice there?
Yeah, I mean, so hiring and firing is, probably the most challenging thing that we have to deal with on a regular basis. It always seems like when you're trying to hire, there's no good talent available. And firing, unless you're a sociopath, I've never met another business owner that looks forward to firing people. And it's always super easy when you're looking at somebody else's situation from the outside to know that they should fire someone, which is why in our meetings, that everybody makes fun of me that I'm always the guy that says fire them, because, we can hear the story somebody else is telling, and we know how it's going to end, but it doesn't change it for the person who's living it. It's never easy to do it. And so, I've certainly had people that in retrospect were toxic that I took way too long to get rid of, and something blew up in a way that could have been averted much easier had we just been proactive. I'm not going to puff up and say that it's easy to fire people, because it's not. It's really hard. But what I found is that every time we've had somebody who wasn't a good fit, or, even potentially was toxic, and they leave, as painful as that is, we always wind up in a better spot. And so, you try to learn from your own experiences and learn from your own mistakes and be faster next time. But the truth is, I don't know that we ever really are, because it's never easy and it's never fun. These people, you like them. I see them every day, and frankly, even when you don't like them, you feel responsible for them. You feel responsible for, why they're not a good fit. And so it's always hard, but it's always good when the Band-Aid gets ripped off.
I 100%. It sucks. I remember the first person I had to let go, I'd been fretting over it for weeks. I was not sleeping for weeks, and it was just terrible. And finally, I just today's the day. I went and did it. And as bad as this sounds, I slept like a baby that night. It was just the stress of getting it off and just getting it done was huge. And, and like you said, rip the Band-Aid off, and it's better on the other side. So I came across,
and I've heard Ben talk about, I'm sure you've heard him say something similar too, where it's like, hey, look, I'm going to help transition you to the next thing that's better for you. And so, you can do it in a way that also really helps them, even though, it's not going to be with you. You're going to be a great fit somewhere. It's just not here. So let's find that next place. Now, usually, even when you approach it that way, they're like, no, fuck you. And, they don't want your help, but, you still can be a mensch about it. It's hard. It's always hard.
Yeah, it is. So I came across a post that you did. I don't know when it was, but I came across it. So basically, you said something to the effect of, if your law firm is not profitable, then you're not helping people. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So, assuming that you're good at what you do. So that's like the baseline, right? Like, I know that when somebody is our client, that we're going to put them in a better spot than they would be on their own. And, picking up the pieces where people hire other attorneys and wind up hiring us, to clean up their mistakes. I know that we also do a better job than a lot of the other people out there. So assuming that you feel that way about the product you're delivering, it takes a little bit of a mindset shift, but it's actually, you're doing a disservice to the community by not running a healthy, profitable business, because I want to be able to help as many people as I can. And the way that I can do that is by making my businesses reach as big as possible. And, here we are in late stage capitalism. That requires making money. And, it requires making money for a lot of reasons. Number one, I have to pay my employees and pay the bills and, pay my own mortgage. But in addition to that, case acquisition is, I think in most areas of the law, is like one of the biggest expenses. How am I going to market to get cases? And in order to do that, to put the word out about the services we can deliver, and in order to help the most people, we have to be able to spend money on marketing and acquiring new clients. And so all of that requires making money, which means being profitable.
I'm with you. And, contingency is even, different than hourly, because obviously you got to front a case for some time before you actually turns into money. So you've got that issue. But even on hourly cases, if you're working for free, not on purpose, you're going to stress yourself out, and it's going to negatively affect everybody in your sphere, including all your other clients. So yeah, 100%. You got to be profitable. You got to make money. Real quick, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, please check out my book, The Law Firm Lifecycle. It's written for law firm owners and those who plan to be owners. In the book, I discuss various issues that come up as a law firm progresses through the stages of its growth, from just before starting a firm to when it comes to an end. The Law Firm Life Cycle is available on Amazon. Now back to the show. So you mentioned marketing. So what sorts of things do you do? I know some of them, and I know, we're sort of in the same program in school, so we do some of the same things, but, what types of things do you do to get cases?
Well, so in PI, it's getting harder and harder. There's more and more money. Private equity is now here officially in the PI space. And there are, in every market you can go to, there's somebody who's going to outspend you on TV or on pay-per-click to acquire cases. And so for somebody like me who's not doing that, kind of mass media approach and doesn't have a bottomless checkbook, I think you have to spend smart money to be where those people can't be. And the places those people can't be are in relationships. And so, we spend a lot of time trying to build relationships with different referral partners or different community organizations to just show up and be there all the time. And, that means more than just, sponsoring, a banner on the high school baseball team's field. You gotta be present as much as possible so that people know you and know the firm. And those are the things that the big guys can't do. They can spend, $10 million a year on TV, but they can't be in the community the same way that we are. And so we try to do as much of that as we can that makes sense. And it's challenging. But interestingly, today, I did a thing middle of last year where I basically went to a bunch of physical therapy offices and did a continuing physical therapist education credit for them. I went through the process of getting, here's my presentation. I got it approved for credits for them. And then I reached out to some offices and said, hey, I'm going to bring you lunch. I'm going to talk to your therapist for an hour. And at the end of it, you're going to get an hour of continuing education credit. And so, got a bunch of yeses, right? Free lunch and free credit. Who's going to say no? And there wasn't a pitch, except my pitch was, I'm around and I will help you with whatever questions you have, even if it's not my case. And I know that you all have attorneys that you can't get on the phone and you have simple questions for. I'm that guy. And so today I got a call from someone I haven't heard from for a year, and they were asking a question about what another attorney is doing on a case and what they should do and blah, blah, blah. And so, it's just kind of establishing that goodwill in the community and being someone that, demonstrated subject matter expertise and that they know they can depend on.
So,
and I think that's the key.
Yeah, so I like that. So you're right. The big 800-pound gorillas aren't going to be doing that kind of stuff. They don't have the infrastructure internally to do that. I've never heard of anybody doing that. The other thing that I think a smaller firm gets to do, which just based on knowing you for a while that I've seen you do, is you get to experiment. You get to run these little experiments, trying new little things to test to see if these things work. And so how often are you thoughtful, like we're going to try a new thing this quarter, or is it just sort of like when we think about it, we might run a new test? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think anytime I have a good idea about something, I'm like, let's give this a shot. Or one of my team has a good idea about something. And most of the time, those ideas can be, I hear what somebody else is doing in a different market. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of a cool thing. Or, even a different industry, like, oh, that's kind of cool. Maybe I could apply that. And so, I do try to experiment. I'm doing a mailer actually, like right now, that's going out to chiropractors. That's kind of a different message than, what they hear from most PI lawyers. I don't want to be part of the noise. And so anything I'm going to say out there, I want it to be different than things that other people are saying. And so, it's hard to come up with good ideas though. I don't want to chase bad ideas with money and see if they work. I want to be sure that everything I'm doing is intentional and thoughtful, and there's a reason and there's a reason why I think it's going to work.
There's lots of ways to burn money. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
I've burned my fair share. So switch back to the firm. So let's talk about sort of your role in the firm. We talked a little bit about marketing. You could be running cases, you're managing the firm, maybe you're doing intake. What kind of functions do you have in the firm now, and maybe how do you split up that time?
Yeah, one of the things that is one of our differentiators is that everybody who calls in, whether they're a person we can help or not, so whether they're qualified or not, they get to talk to an attorney on the first call. And, most people in my niche they don't get to talk to lawyers. They talk to, the intake person or maybe a paralegal. And so that's one of our differentiators. If you call, you're going to talk to a lawyer. And most of the time that's me, because that's something I want to do. And I like doing it. And I like being able to help people that we can't help. My goal is that anybody who calls, I'm going to put them in a better spot than they were when they call. So I do spend a fair amount of time talking to potential clients when they call. Most of my day, though, is spent, I would say, putting out the internal fires that are, constantly popping up in firms and trying to teach my people how to not have that fire happen again and how they can manage it themselves. I'm trying to work myself out of a job, but it's a challenge. And I don't know that I'll get there soon, but I'm always working on that. So I would say it's probably of my day. And I'm only in the office maybe 20, 25 hours a week. I would say that, 50% of that time is dealing with my employees and helping them, to make sure that all the wheels are turning still. And probably 25% of the time is dealing with new clients, potential clients, and working on some of the cases that I'm handling in the office, which is not very many anymore, but some of them that I'm handling. And then the other 25% of the time is generating business. How am I going to keep the lights on with new cases?
So I guess because you had all this free time out of the office, maybe that's why you went to become a professor. Tell me about that. So to lay the groundwork, you are now teaching a law class. So maybe, tell me what that is, how it came about.
Yeah, well, so I'm 52 years old and trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. And so, kind of what's the next chapter look like, whether it's because I do a good job of working myself out of a job, or whether it's because we sell to private equity, or whether it's because, a new partner comes in and buys me out, whatever. I'm trying to figure out what's the next stage look like. And so I'm trying to do some law firm consulting for, firms that kind of want to grow and, kind of get through their problems, kind of like I did for my sister's business. I'm trying to do that for other smaller law firms that are a few steps behind where I am. But one of the other things I thought would be kind of cool is like, okay, what if I went and taught at law school? And Ryan McKean, I stole the idea from him. He was posting about his law firm entrepreneurship class that he's doing at UConn School of Law. And I thought, hey, that'd be really cool to do at my local law school here in Seattle. And so I pitched it to them and they were like, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. And so I am an adjunct professor of law at Seattle University School of Law. This last term I taught pretrial advocacy, which was cool because it was like a designed course that already had like, here's the book we use and here's the syllabus, all that stuff. And so I was able to kind of, get my feet wet in teaching law students. And then this term I'm teaching law firm entrepreneurship, which is the class that, is my design and I'm figuring out what to do every week and kind of bringing to the law students what we didn't have, certainly when I was in school. How do you start and grow a firm is what class is all about.
So what's it been like so far being a professor? Do you enjoy it? You're like, hey, this is something I could keep doing?
Yeah, I do enjoy it. I will say that in both of my classes so far, the students are far, far smarter than I was when I was in law school. Like, I feel like they're way more put together than I was, or at least than I felt like I was. And so they're receptive to, so far in both classes, they're receptive. I think this class specifically is really cool because one of the things that I decided would be good is each week I have a guest speaker come in. It's a 2-hour class. Each week I have a guest speaker come in and speak for an hour about whatever they want. And typically it's somebody else who's kind of in that entrepreneurial space, usually as a lawyer or law firm adjacent. And so, you came in and spoke, which was great. And you offered a cool perspective because you deal with like firm formations and firm breakups. And so you had a cool way of looking at it. And then I brought Ben Glass in. And this week it was, the classes yesterday. Brian spoke about like, hey, here's what, if I was a young attorney, what I would do if I had a firm job. So I prepared myself for the next step when I was going to do my own thing. So everybody brings their own thing to it. And I would imagine that me bringing in those speakers is kind of a lot like you doing this podcast. Is one of the things I do is I ask people to speak who I want to hear what they have to say for an hour because I want to learn something. And so, I think exposing the students to all these different ideas is great. And yeah, like I said, they're super sharp. So it's been really cool.
So fall semester, you're looking to do it again? Is it?
Yeah. So the entrepreneurial class is only going to be offered once a year, but for fall, I'll probably do another, either trial advocacy or pretrial advocacy or, some sort of other class. I don't really want to do a substantive class. I don't want to do like, constitutional law or tort law or anything like that.
Hell no. Yeah.
Yeah. But like a practical class,
Yeah.
I would be, that would be fun to do another one. And so far, I think they want me to come back. So, I guess that's good.
That's cool, man. That's cool. So you mentioned law firm consulting. I did not know you were doing that. So I want to dive into that a little bit. So when did you start that, and how are you finding your clients there?
Yeah. So the only social media I'm on, I hate social media in general, but the only one I'm on is Reddit. And, kind of like my philosophy about how I market the law firm is I just, I market my law firm by giving information, right? I'm just going to give. And if that means somebody wants to hire me, great. And so one of the subreddits I'm on, somebody was asking some question about, hey, I'm trying to do this in my firm. And, what are the thoughts about this? And I, wrote a thoughtful response, and the person reached back out to me and said, hey, can we talk? And so I had a conversation with them, and I said, look, I don't do this yet, but I think it would be cool. And so how about if I will do like a weekly, or, I think we do bi-weekly consulting with you, and you pay me X dollars a month, and I'm going to do it cheap because you're my first client, and we'll see how it goes. And we've been doing it for about a year now. And in fact, I just flew out to their office last month and did like an in-person meeting with the firm. And, we're making steps, and the firm is changing and growing. And so it's something that I want to do more of. I don't really know how to market it and how to get in the space, especially because it's a very crowded space right now. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to compete with, some of these organizations that are doing it on a larger scale. So I'm hoping that through the way I'm doing it, there's going to be just other kind of word of mouth, like, hey, this guy can help you, and, and do kind of this high level consulting. And actually, when I was out there meeting with them, one of the things I did, so maybe you'll hire me, Jonathan. One of the things I did is I kind of helped start implementing EOS with the firm. And so, I think having solved a lot of these problems in my firm, it's easy to figure out solutions that other people aren't seeing in their firm.
That's cool. And looking back the thread now, you got your firm, you've got your sister's med spa. This might be your destiny. I don't know. This may be, you've been building up for this, man. So
it'd be super cool. I mean, I love doing it. It's, every time I travel somewhere, I'm always dreading going away. But when I was there, I was with those guys for like a day and a half, and I had so much fun doing that, and like digging into what their problems were, and, figuring out, the different group dynamics. And, that firm had 4 partners, and like figuring out who the 4 personalities and how each person was going to fill different roles. And it was super cool, super rewarding. I had a lot of fun. And so, yeah, I'm definitely hoping to do more of that.
Well, that's cool. I can tell just from watching you and hearing you that you enjoy it. And, generally speaking, I'm like, run towards that thing. So, so I think that's cool. So let's circle back to Reddit. I want to hear more about Reddit. So every now and then I'll do a Google search, and it'll point me to a Reddit thread or something, but I don't spend that much time on it. So what got you on it? Is it pretty vibrant legal community where they're sharing ideas, or, tell me about it. I don't know much about Reddit.
Yeah. Reddit is interesting because it's completely anonymous, and it's basically, the format is there are these subreddits, which is like a topic. And then, somebody will post, sometimes it's a question, sometimes it's a thought, whatever. And then, there's responses, and then there's nested responses inside the responses. And there's a system they use called Karma, where you get upvotes and get, other users will say like, yeah, I like what you're saying, basically. And it, I think that it's dangerous because there's no guarantee of subject matter expertise from anybody, right? So somebody could be asking a question like, do I have cancer? And, like you're going to have people that have no idea what they're talking about that are going to be, chiming in. But every now and then there are, really thoughtful, intricate responses about different things. And you can just focus on the things you're interested in. So like, some of the subreddits I'm in, like, I have an EV. And so like, I'm on like an EV subreddit. So I'm, constantly like, getting information or thoughts or whatever about, electric vehicles. And then, like I'm a huge Matrix fan. So I'm on like a Matrix subreddit where, people were still postulating theories about the Matrix. And then in Star Trek, of course. And then I'm on, there's a bunch of, law firm ones, and it's their algorithm figured that out for me. Like I didn't go look for that. but it would serve me stuff. And then the more I would answer stuff, the more it knows what to serve you. And so, I'll see these things come by the feed. And when I feel like I've got something intelligent to say, I'll say it, and so, but again, nobody knows who I am and nobody knows if I'm full of shit or not. And so it's, either the things you say kind of resonate or they don't. And I'll tell you, there are lots of things I've said that get blamed by, by the community. In fact, one of the subs that I will frequently comment on is an insurance subreddit. And that insurance subreddit is mostly followed by insurance adjusters. And so somebody will ask an insurance question and I'll give, my opinion on the question and I'll just get destroyed, right? Because they're all like, no, you don't need a lawyer for anything. Insurance companies are fair, and I get downvoted into oblivion. But, ultimately I just say stuff that I know or that I'm comfortable with. And it's interesting to see the engagement that comes back and try to not take it too personally. So it's a different social media. There's nothing really personal about it. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody's got my picture. Nobody, I'm not posting like, hey, look at this cool steak I ate. It's just like, here's what I think about this thing. And for whatever reason, it kind of fits with my personality.
So it seems like I heard like you can't really self-promote or you get kicked out or something like that. I mean, you did get a law firm consulting client. Have you got any like PI clients, or are you even able to if you're anonymous and you can't really promote?
So most of the subreddits have moderators that are like volunteer moderators that run the subreddit. And most of the subreddits have rules that the subreddit has to follow. And so if you violate a rule, they'll kick your post out and sometimes they'll even block you from the subreddit. And so most of them, you can't self-promote. That's one of the things. So, because people, if somebody's asking a question, they don't want a bunch of people saying, hire me. They want, solutions or answers or directions to their problem. So the answer to your question is yes, I have got actual real clients from them, but it's usually from a DM that happens after. So I'll either, give something for free and I'll say, if you want more information, DM me. And then, the person will DM me. And then I'll say, by the way, I am a car accident lawyer. Here's my website. Let me know if you want to talk about your case. And so I think I've got either 2 or 3 actual clients from Reddit that are like, car accident cases. But yeah, it is hard to self-promote. And one thing that all the LLMs, so all of the AI LLMs heavily train on Reddit. And so one of the things that especially PI attorneys are trying to do is figure out how to get their brand name mentioned in Reddit as subject matter experts or something. And that is, most of the subreddits do not like it and do not allow it. And it's considered very spammy and they boot you and ban you when you do it. So you gotta figure out other ways to be relevant.
Sounds like it would take a little while to figure all that out, but I may start exploring a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you that I think the key to Reddit is don't go to Reddit trying to monetize it and make it a business asset. I happen to find it really interesting, and I happen to think everybody is entitled to my opinion, whether they want it or not. So it's the perfect format for that, because I can just spout stuff off. And, fortunately, I guess people think that I sound intelligent sometimes and it's turned into this stuff.
All right, so everybody's entitled to your opinion. So I'm going to ask, switching gears a little bit, for people out there that are running their firms, trying to start a firm, trying to grow their firm, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think what I would say is there's no right or wrong answer to anything. Well, that's not entirely true. There are some very wrong answers, but there's no one right way to do things. And so I think that intention is key and thoughtfulness is key. So whatever it is you want to build, really think through it and think, okay, why am I doing this thing? Whatever that thing is, whatever the next thing is, why am I doing it that way? And is there a reason, or is it just because that's what everybody does? And do I need to do it that way? Is there a better way to do it? And that applies to, marketing, management, everything, and build intentionally to what you want. So for example, I was just, before we talked, I had a minute, I was on Reddit, and there was somebody saying, I started my firm 4 years ago, and I've got 8 employees, 2 other lawyers working for me, and I'm burned out, and here's what my day looks like, and I don't want to do this anymore, and I feel like I'm working just to meet payroll and blah, blah, blah. And, as I was reading that, I was like, yeah, you built yourself a job instead of building yourself a firm and a lifestyle. And if you would have thought about it from the beginning and said, okay, these are the things I want to do. These are things I don't want to do. So I'm going to bring in these people to do the things I don't want to do so I can focus on things I do want to do. That person would be in a very different situation than they're in now. And so I think, doing things with intention is the key. And, look around at what other people are doing and say, is that really the best way to do it? Or is there another way?
And to your point, Joe Schmo down the street is doing whatever. That does not mean you got to go chase what he's doing. And oftentimes, if you try to chase someone else is doing, then you're not really building something that's right for you. So, and clearly, look, you work 25 hours, or you're in the office 20, 25 hours. You're teaching a class, you're getting to do all these things. So obviously you've built it the way you want to build it. So maybe that's the next question. You may not know the answer. We've talked about it a little bit, but what's the vision? What, 10, 15 years from now? Where do you see you and your firm?
Yeah, that is a tough question. And I think that there's two factors that are outside of my control that are going to dramatically impact that. Number one is technology. Just, how is AI really going to change what people like me and you that are selling a professional service do every day? And then number two, what's going to happen with private equity in our space? And how is that going to squeeze the market? And what's going to be left when they're done eating what they're going to eat? So I don't think I have a good answer for either one of those two questions. So it's hard for me to fast forward, 10 to 15 years. But I will say that I would be surprised. I feel like my horizon is inside of 5 years to not be running a firm. I don't know what I would be doing with most of my time after that, because there's only so many hours a day you can work out. But I can't imagine that because of the combination of those two things, and, this won't affect you, but self-driving cars, is kind of the third thing that's kept me up at night for the last 25 years. So, I think that those three things are going to dramatically change the personal injury space for sure in the next 15 years. And I think if I knew what it was going to look like in 15 years, I would probably be able to be a billionaire. So I don't really know what it's going to look like, but I don't think I got that long anyways. I'm looking at a 5-year horizon. Hopefully in 5 years, I'm not working in a law firm every day.
You heard it here first, guys. 5 years. So we didn't get to talk about working out. Next time we'll talk about that. I know you do a lot of that. I do too. So we'll get to next time. We'll talk about that. But Jason, thanks for coming on. This has been fun. Learned a little bit more about you that I didn't know. That's always fun too. But for people out there that want to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Jason at premierlawgroup.com, or you can follow me on LinkedIn. You can DM me on LinkedIn. Go to my website. You can message me through there, whatever you want. I'm not that hard to find. And I want to say to you and to the audience, I had to beg Jonathan to be on the podcast. I told him at our last meeting, I had to say, hey, look, I'm starting to get hurt feelings. You're asking everybody except me. And so, look, I think this is a testament to if you want to be on Jonathan's podcast, you just have to guilt him into it, and he'll have you on.
And in response, I said, who are you?
Exactly. I've been sitting next to you for a year, but what's your name?
Exactly. Well, the other thing is people need to go on Reddit and see if they can figure out who you are. That's a little mystery.
No, don't dox me. I'm sure I would imagine it won't be that hard if people want to figure out what my user ID is on Reddit. But yeah, Reddit is cool.
Well, cool. Thanks again, man.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Founding Partner Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes. You can also connect with Jonathan on LinkedIn and check out the show notes with links to resources mentioned throughout our discussion by visiting www.lawfirmgc.com. We'll see you next time for more origin stories and insights from successful law firm founders.